Hey, Chris, how are you? I don't think I had my audio on. It's good to see you. How are things in Lexington, Frankfurt area? Good morning, Cheryl.
Hey, Julie. Hi, Chris. Welcome.
Have you done your session roundtable yet, Chris? Or is that to come? Good morning, Brenda. Hey, Brian. Thanks for joining us. We'll start here in just a few minutes. Let everybody just get joined in, and from Kansas.
Good morning, Brenda.
Not too far from me, Brenda. I'm in Springfield, Missouri. So depending on which side of Kansas you're in, if you're just across the line, I'm kind of your neighbor. Olathe. Good to see you. I hope you enjoy this morning session. We'll give everybody just a few minutes to jump in with us. Is it hot everywhere? I know it's burning hot, make you think you woke up in some place you don't want to wake up here in southern Missouri. Chris says it is in Lexington as well.
It's very hot here in Lexington.
Yeah. Oh, Kansas City. Olathe is Kansas City. Okay, so about a 3-hour drive from where I'm at. Brenda, what company are you with up there, Brenda? Mike says it's hot in Detroit. Hot and humid in PA. So I think that's just the story, kind of everywhere. Oh, Wisconsin. Yeah, Judy has to rub it in that it's beautiful in the 80s in Wisconsin. Of course, Judy, but you get all that snow up there. Those of us in the South don't get as many. 76 in Seattle.
Nice.
New Hampshire. Yeah, you guys are a little bit cooler, a little bit further north. We got a good crowd today. It was good to see everyone. Steve, Minneapolis, coming in at 68. I went up to Minneapolis to do a deployment. Most of our deployments were typically done during the winter, right? In the winter months when you all are not doing landscaping. And they sent me to, I'd never been up that far, up into Minnesota. Sent me to Minneapolis, Minnesota on like January 15th or something absolutely ridiculous. And oh my goodness, I thought I knew what cold was being from Indianapolis, Indiana, but I didn't know exactly how cold was until I went up to Minnesota. A really good crowd this morning. Thanks everyone for joining us. We'll give everybody just another minute here before we get started. I think the folks in Minnesota and maybe New Hampshire or Connecticut are the only ones that probably don't have 100% humidity at this point. So today, Miss Cheryl is going to keep an eye on the chat window. Hey, Elise, how are you? Miss Cheryl's going to keep an eye on the chat window. I'm going to do the training. And then next session after this, one of the sessions, Cheryl is actually going to be presenting, and I'm going to be watching the chat window. So we're teaming up today. If you have any questions at all, let Cheryl know. She'll let me know maybe if it's something that she feels like we need to discuss. Otherwise, I'm going to kind of keep my eyes on the presentation, and we will jump in and get started here. This is my first presentation, so I'm going to have to get good at making sure I'm displaying my screen. So let me give that a shot here. And Miss Cheryl, if you can let me know if that screen, the slideshow is showing okay?
I will. It's not yet.
It's not yet. Interesting. Okay. Give me just a second here, and I will try to figure that out.
Do you see the computer screen down at the bottom?
I do. And perhaps I need to show another window.
Do you have
That, let me get my screen up here. Maybe I just totally need to have it on a different screen. So let me pull it over here and then show that screen, and we'll see how that works out.
There we go. Yep.
All right. If this is your first class, like it is mine, obviously, if you want to double click on that area that you're seeing the slide show, that will maximize that for you. And so it'll minimize Cheryl and I and make that a little bit bigger for you. So welcome today to our Winter Purchasing and Materials Sub-Auto Expense class. I'm Julie Elson. I got my coworker Cheryl Hall on the line. Cheryl is one of our implementation managers, and I am a senior implementation trainer with the company. I do a lot of the training and the data loads, so happy that you're with us today. And today, our goal is to look at an overview of the winter purchasing. Now, there's been a number of other webinars and training sessions during the event that have gone through the setup of the sub-auto expense. Today, we're just looking in our session at just the purchasing side of that. So if you missed those, I'm sure all this data is going to be available to you. We're recording all of these. You'll want to go back and watch those, but specifically, we're focusing on just the purchasing side. So we're going to talk about analyzing and estimating your ice melt needs. The majority of the time today, we're going to be talking about the sub functionality and how to use the sub-auto expense functionality and how it differs by invoice type and those effects that we'll see within the purchasing assistant. When the invoices are received from the sub upon completion of an event, those should match the purchase receipts that have already been created in your system. And then we're going to take a look at performing some purchasing assistant cleanup for those unused or partial records that have been sent to the purchasing assistant where perhaps you didn't allocate that much material. So I'm going to jump ahead over into Aspire now, if I can make that happen. So bear with me just 1 second. And Cheryl, did that work okay?
I'm still seeing your PowerPoint.
Still seeing the PowerPoint.
Now I see Aspire. You're
All
good.
right. All right. Thanks, everyone, for being patient with that. So the first thing that we want to look at today, and I'm going to need to get that PowerPoint off onto another screen. The first thing we need to look at today is SALT. Some lists, some reporting within Aspire that's going to allow us to look out into the future and see our SALT. Now, as you know, that's going to be a bit of a crapshoot. Depending on how you estimate, depending on the invoice types that you use. If you're using a lot of T&M or per service invoicing, you simply have a flat fee that you're charging when you go out or a time and materials rate, then those are going to be dependent on the number of storms. I grew up in the industry in the Indianapolis area. We didn't have the privilege of knowing from season to season. There was no such thing as, if you will, a normal snow season. There were winters, I remember, where we had 2 events. There were winters when we were buried from December through February. And so if you're in a more consistent market, using the ticket list is going to be a little bit better. But let's go into purchasing. And it's over here, and I'm going to go into my purchasing assistant. The list I want to show you that you can build for snow materials, I've called it snow materials cleanup. And as far as what fields I'm looking at here, I'm filtering by the division is in snow. Of course, the quantity to order is greater than 0. That's our main default on many of our purchasing lists. The category is in snow. The item type is material. That way I'm filtering out all of my subs, and that's not the list I want. Sorry, let me back up here. Snow material needs. Opportunity division is snow, quantity to order greater than 0, category snow. Scheduled start date, I went ahead and typed in this year. If you need to do a date range, maybe you just want to look at this month, obviously pick that. And the item type is material. So remember, what this is looking at is my estimates. And you notice I've grouped it by item. Don't forget, you've got your collapse and expand here, especially handy if you have totals over here to the right. And I've got this on a smaller screen, so I had to scroll over. But we can collapse all those and see. So for the upcoming year, in my case, I'm going to need 688 bags of salt, and I'm going to need 392 tons, or whatever my unit of measure is, for bulk salt. Now that's based on my estimates. Of course, we all know an estimate is an estimate, and snow is unpredictable. So you can combine that along with your past history of how much salt you've needed to purchase. Obviously, procuring that in advance, getting those quantities firmed up with your suppliers, and of course, trying to get some pricing locked in is going to be key for you throughout the season. Utilize an option in Aspire that you may not be quite familiar with. I'm going to go over here to my purchase receipts called Receive Partial. And I've got a purchase receipt set up here for Site 1. And this is for 20 tons of salt. So this may be for the whole month, for the whole season, to get you through a couple of weeks. You know, I don't know how much you all will be using. But the idea here is if you need to order 20 for the whole season, or 100 or 200 for the whole season, you have the ability to do one purchase order, assuming it's all coming from the same vendor and going to the same inventory location, right? Those are two restrictions that we always have when we're doing a purchase receipt. You can come down here and say Receive Partial. And when you click the Receive Partial, it's going to ask you if you want to do a partial receipt. And then you get a different screen where it allows you to say, well, on this particular receipt, I only received 2 tons in this delivery. And I can key in my receive date and go ahead and hit save. Now, Aspire is going to ask me, do you want to create a back order for that remaining balance? And in my instance, it's 18 tons. If I needed to purchase, if this vendor is out of salt, I need to go do another purchase order, then I could say, no, I don't want to create a back order because this vendor doesn't have any more salt. But typically, the case would be yes, you would want to create the back order. That processes this purchase receipt for the 2. And then let me go ahead and save this. And then when we go back and look at the purchasing assistant, we're going to see that there are 18 remaining for this one. That's just going to save you a few minutes in writing additional purchase orders. Then you can call up the vendor and say, hey, it's purchase order number 232. I need another delivery of 3 tons. So something that may help you there if you utilize that Receive Partial. That's a great functionality in Aspire if you didn't know that was there. The other thing in advance of purchasing materials for snow is if you use or utilize during the snow season, it seems to be more common, multiple inventory locations. Make sure you have those set up in advance. Those are set up back under administration. I know when I was in the industry in Indianapolis, we had a couple very large corporate clients where we actually had a location on site where we had salt deliveries. I physically never went there and saw. I'm going to guess it was just some kind of big pile outside, or maybe it had some kind of cover over it to keep it out of the weather. And we set that up as an inventory location. So make sure those inventory locations are set up. And of course, you've done receipts to stock that inventory so that when you go to approve time, you can allocate materials from that inventory location and specifically then track that inventory. What I want to do next is go back over to the PowerPoint and talk to you a little bit about Purchasing Assistant. And hopefully this is going to work. Miss Cheryl, am I back to my PowerPoint now? Thank you. This is a little bugs you have to work out along the way. Sub-expense. when preparing for sub expenses that are going to go to purchasing assistant, remember we purchase everything that's non-labor in Aspire. So we have 5 item types: labor, which does not go to purchasing; material, equipment, sub, and other. So in order to allocate these costs to the job and to get our vendor paid, the subcontractor expenses are going to go through purchasing. Those operate differently, whether this is an event that is based on time and materials or per occurrence, or if it is your opportunities are set up as fixed payment. So there's some purchasing lists that we'd like to show you that you can build based on if it is an event that is per occurrence or T&M, or if it is an event that is sub. And those vary, using the sub auto expense for fixed payment. Those vary a bit. So let's go over to the purchasing assistant. And I'm going to take a look first at the event-based sub list. Now, the event-based sub list, these are per occurrence in T&M. So stop to think about that for a minute. How are those expenses for the sub going to get into purchasing assistant? Well, there's 2 ways. If you are using the sub auto expense functionality in Aspire, which we've had a whole couple webinars on today, that if you haven't been to those, you'll be able to watch those. We're not going to cover that today. We're assuming that we're dealing with it after it gets there. Either we can use that sub auto expense feature, or we could key those in manually. So these are fixed price tickets. Our best practice is, when we're doing fixed price, to have 1 ticket for the entire season. So if you're performing a plowing service, you've got 1 ticket for the entire season. So there is no way for the sub expense to be generated automatically because the ticket is not completed per event. You've agreed with your sub to pay them either hourly, per push, by amount of snowfall, whatever the amount, and you can set that up on the service. And then you go find those tickets when you had an event, find which properties were serviced, find those particular areas of town. Maybe it didn't snow on one side of town, maybe it did on the other. And you can go to the tickets then and manually generate that sub expense. If you do not desire to do that, it's great. It's an automated way. It helps out. You can still come into purchasing, do a manual purchase receipt, say, I got this invoice from, this one is from Smith Snow Service. They did plowing, ice melt, and they plowed the walks with the ATV at Charleston's. I could just as easily manually enter that, and that's okay. Maybe if you're in a smaller market, you don't have as many events, that works just as well for you. If you're in a larger market and you send out, you utilize subs a lot, you dispatch all of those subs for a storm, you can en masse, I say manually generate, but it's en masse. You could do 100 or 1,000 at a time, generate those expenses. They land over here in the purchasing assistant. They come over as an item type of sub, so we're going to filter for that. Scheduled start date, I've done through today, assuming that my event was, let's say, yesterday. My opportunity division is in snow, and my item quantity remaining, of course, is greater than 0, meaning I have not paid that sub yet. So if I am asking my subcontractors to submit their invoice per event, I could come in here and find all of these that were through today, and then I could process these because their invoice should exactly match whatever I had set up on the service to pay them. $195 in this case for the walks, $98 for the ice melt, and then $270 for the plowing services. Now, one thing to remember on this particular type, on the fixed payment, there's a single ticket. So if I want to reconcile my sub invoice, if I have instructed them, we're not paying you per event, we're paying you at the end of the month, then these will continue to compile on the same ticket throughout the month. So make your decision as to whether you want to generate your purchase order based on event. You could still gather those up and pay them all at once, or you could pay on a per event basis. The second list I want to show you is the fixed payment sub-event. Now, I just messed up. The event-based sub-expense per occurrence in T&M, I totally got that wrong. Forgive me. The event-based sub-expense, that's coming over on individual tickets. So erase what I said, my bad. Reverse, back up, start over. Event-based is coming over per ticket. Each time you complete the ticket, you're getting a new record, right? They're going to go out, there's an event, they complete it, that triggers this expense. They go out, there's another event, they complete the ticket, that triggers this expense, all right? What I mentioned earlier was the fixed payment. So I was talking about how fixed payments work, but showing you the event-based sublist. So my apologies there. You can pay per event. You could let this pile up. However you have, there again, however you've asked your subcontractors to submit their invoices, if they're submitting them event by event, then you should have a purchase receipt list here that exactly matches the invoice that the sub is sending to you. All right. Now, let's move on to the one that I thought I was on before. Fixed payment sub expenses. There's only a single work ticket here. So these are, unlike what I mentioned earlier, these are going to pile up on this same ticket. There's one ticket per season. So we can either come in here after an event, do our manual generation for these to show up here, and we do that through triggering a sub-auto expense. We could let these accumulate, or we could match this up to a single invoice. If when the event is done, we ask our subcontractor to send a single invoice for this, then we would get an invoice from this particular vendor. If I did the math, 270, 9750, and 195. I don't have my subtotaling on, but I get a single invoice for the vicinity of $500 here for this event. All right, next time we have an event, if we have another one, they could submit another invoice. I could generate that, trigger that sub-auto expense and have these records here. This one comes in a little bit differently. These, let me go into the gear because it's easier for you to see in there. These come in without a category name. So the key to finding these on your list is to say category name is not in and list every one of your categories. Okay? So it's here again, through this week or through today or whatever day you need to show up for your event. Division is in snow. Item quantity remaining is greater than 0. That's our default. That's what we're always looking for. And it's not in any of these categories. So that is what's going to show us those that have been triggered by us manually to get this entry in here to pay our subcontractors on our fixed payment. And because I messed that up, let's go back to this one, just do another overview. This is being triggered by ticket completion. These are T&M on completion or per occurrence on completion. When the subcontractor completes the work ticket, Aspire automatically puts this here based on what you've set up at the service level as a sub-auto expense. All right. Apologize for that confusion. One other thing that we need to look at while we're here at our purchasing assistant is we looked at our snow materials needs. We're looking at our specific event-based or our fixed payment is a snow materials cleanup list. On this list, I'm looking at my division of snow, of course, quantity to order greater than 0, meaning we have not purchased or written the purchase order for all of the materials or all of the sub that has hit the purchasing assistant. My categories in snow, my item type is in material. This one specifically, I'm just looking for materials. And the status of the work ticket is incomplete, right? If you've come to some of our purchasing receipt cleanup webinars, this is very similar to that. So let's take a look at this list. The ticket has been completed, which if you're following the cardinal rule of Aspire, you never complete a work ticket until all of the time and materials, and when we say materials, we mean material, equipment, sub, and other, have been entered. So why then would a snow sidewalk clearing and ice melt T&M ticket still be setting here incompleted with quantity estimated at 1 and quantity to order at 1 still be setting in your purchasing assistant? I hope the case isn't because someone forgot to allocate the materials before you completed the ticket and cut the invoice because you've just lost revenue. It could be that they cleared them and they didn't need to use any ice melt. I don't know. I mean, it might be the situation, but we can investigate these. Now down here at some of these other tickets, we look here, there were 5.3 tons estimated on bulk salt on this particular work ticket. We only used 1.3. So this came through because this is what was allocated on the work ticket. You know, not at all unusual. Maybe there wasn't that much. Maybe we didn't need to spread it that thick. Maybe all of the area didn't need covered. So this is perfectly fine, but we need to do a little bit of cleanup. And we can see that throughout some of these tickets. There was 1.08 tons estimated. That was probably estimated by, that kind of screams a takeoff measurement to me, where we said we can do X amount of square feet, you know, per ton, and it came up with a very odd, you know, 1.08 tons. Well, probably when we go out and allocate, they just allocated 1 ton. They aren't going to get that granular. So that's leaving us 0.08 left over. Now, this functionality is a bit unforgiving, so identify those in some way, shape, or form. You know, maybe you want to select all. Don't forget you can select all here, select none, or we could select all and then, you know, remove the few that we don't want. Come down here to the gear and say remove from list. Right? That is unforgiving in the sense that it really does remove them from the list. Not the end of the world, but what that would mean is if we had removed this from the list and we need to allocate some more salt to this particular work ticket on Ned's Sporting Goods, we would simply have to go do a manual purchase and allocate that out of inventory. Okay, really simple, not the end of the world. Are there any questions that we need to cover here about that before I go to the slip and falls, Cheryl?
Judy had a quick question. For seasonal subcontracts, we're paying the 4 equal installments, 1 per month. How's that handled? Those will accumulate in purchasing assistant as the tickets are completed.
On fixed payment, so you're billing a fixed payment per month, Judy, right? And you're also paying your sub a fixed payment per month. You could generate those on a monthly basis. So in your setup, you could set that up and then just manually generate those once a month. Or you could come into the purchasing assistant, enter a new purchase receipt once a month, and key in that amount manually. Does that answer your question, Judy? I don't have the chat window up in front of me. Let Cheryl know if that does not.
Yes, it does.
Okay,
Yep.
perfect.
Thank you.
I'm going to go back over to our PowerPoint now. Cheryl, just let me know if y'all aren't seeing that.
I see it.
Review a couple common mistakes to avoid, some things that may make you slip, trip, or fall. The received date on your purchase receipts should be, if you do not want it to show up as warranty, must be before the work date. So let's say you're going to trigger those sub-auto expenses. You've got all of your tickets together. The storm was on the 22nd. When you generate those purchase receipts, use the date of the 22nd. Here again, not the end of the world, but you're going to, any purchase receipt that is, any materials that are purchased, any labor that is allocated after a work ticket is completed is going to show up as warranty. Now, in a snow market, maybe you aren't even looking at the warranty column because there really is no such thing as warranty work. You're not replacing dead plant material. So maybe not a big deal to you, but do be cognizant of that receive date and make sure that that matches up with the date of the event. Don't forget to clean up that purchasing system after the event. That could create a slip, trip, or fall for you if there's just a lot of remaining data in there that doesn't need to be there. And then make sure to double check your inventory location when you're approving time. So when you're in time entry and you're clearing up your event, the very top of time entry, there is a drop-down menu that allows you to pick which inventory location your salt, your ice melt, whatever you're using is allocated from. So if you're in a situation like we were doing salt out at Eli Lilly and Company in Indianapolis, and you've got a big inventory of salt there, make sure all of your employees that are working at Eli Lilly, when you approve their time, that you choose that as their inventory location. Key takeaways, just an overview of what we learned today, some things I want to re-emphasize that I make sure that you get out of today's training. Fixed payment, you can use sub-expenses. It's a great tool to automate the sub-expenses that will be added directly to your purchasing assistant. It allows you want to make sure that you've assigned your subs auto expenses to the service on the opportunity in advance so that when you go to generate those, it pays the according amount, whether it's a flat fee or T&M or any of the other methods in order to get that pushed over to purchasing assistant. Now, failing to utilize the sub auto expense creates more manual work, but there's nothing wrong with that. We get a lot of people that perhaps you generate all your sub auto expenses and there's one missing, and what we see is people go into a little bit of, I don't want to say a panic, but a little bit of panic. Oh, it's missing the one for John's plowing service. Now I've got to go get that. You know what? Just go create it manually. There's nothing wrong with that. That's okay. You can key it in manually. You could key them all in manually. The sub-auto expense feature is just there for you to utilize. It's a great feature if you want to, but it's not the end of the world if you have to enter one manually. Okay? Post-event purchasing assistant cleanup, make sure you perform that. It's going to be so much easier to do that post-event at each event than it's going to be at month end if you've got to do all that cleanup. And certainly if you're closing your month, you're going to want to do it then. But goodness sakes, definitely don't wait till the end of the season. That is not at all best practice. And that's it today for the takeaways. Are there any other questions, things that we can answer for you? I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my window and just go back. Then hopefully it goes back to just Cheryl and I.
It will.
And see if we have any questions.
Alex had a question. Is there a way to set a default inventory location per user in time entry?
There's not, unfortunately. That's a little bit of a snag. If you are, that may be a slip, trip, and fall, quite frankly. If you're using multiple inventory locations. When you accept time, you can only use one inventory location. So it's going to work great. We had specific crews that were out at Eli Lilly. No one else worked that site. And so any materials they allocated were going to come out of Lilly's salt inventory. So if you're doing it regionally, that'll work for you. If not, you may have to just go with a single inventory location. But if everybody on the north side is pulling from a specific inventory, and you can do it by a crew, that would be ideal.
Another way is to double check it when you're approving the time entry.
Right. That happens at the point of time entry. You're not going to see that any other place than that. Any other questions that we have not already answered?
Hold on one second. I have an answer for Charles from John.
Have you covered all of those other questions, Cheryl, that are out there?
Charles, we'll be posting the sub-auto expense demos from yesterday on Aspire Care. Brian Shibb, we have one contract that we charge the client per service, but they pay a seasonal price. What is the best practice for that scenario?
A seasonal price. So you're giving them $5,000 to plow a specific site all year, if I'm understanding that. It's up to you, Brian. Do you want to pay them in advance for the whole year? Do you want to pay them at the end of the year? I would, if it were me, I think I would just set that up manually, or it could be a one-time generation as an auto expense. I think if you set it up as an auto expense, you're going to need to be careful that you only generate that once, as opposed to generating it monthly. So whatever works best for you to know that that's going to be only paid one time, in a method that you can control that and not have any additional expenses hit the purchasing assistant, so you don't pay him, God forbid, that annual amount, 5 months during the snow. Tia, is that how you pronounce Tia? I assume your name. Where do you set up auto expenses at? Those are set up at the service level. I hesitate to get into that too much at this session because there's a whole session on that. But if you go into an opportunity, click on the service, you'll see the opportunity down in the gear to set up the sub-auto expense. And there's a whole session on it. All of these sessions are being taped, and they'll be available for you to view. If you were not able to get to that, I think that session has already been held. But you'll be able to view these and learn all of that after the summit. They're going to be posted. And according to Cheryl, did John say those are going to be posted on Aspire Care?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Okay. Well, it's great to see you all here today. I apologize for the little mess up when I was teaching you the wrong thing, but hopefully the backtrack there helped us get back online. Any further questions, comments? Cheryl and I will hang around here. If you have any other questions, feel free to type those in. If not, we just really thank you all for coming. We hope you're enjoying the summit. We put a great deal, as Kevin Kehoe mentioned earlier this morning, we put a great deal of effort into that. It's our first time, so we're learning this virtual world along with the rest of you when we can't get together. So thanks so much for your participation and enjoying us today, and may see some of the same folks later today on Cheryl's event. I think it's up here in the next half hour or so.
Next 15 minutes.
All right. So we'll stick around if you have any questions, and watch that questions window. All quiet on the Western Front. Thanks for coming, Brenda. We appreciate it. Anybody else have any comments, questions? Anything we can answer for you while we're here? We've got just a few minutes left in our session before it's going to cut us off. All right, everyone. Well, I think we're going to go ahead and head out, get prepped for our next session. So thanks for joining us. It's been our pleasure. We hope you have a great snow season and hope that you're enjoying our summit. So take care. Have a pleasant rest of the week.